Chapter 19. Scally's Ides of March. After driving his mother's Honda Civic to the pro wrestling headquarters in Philadelphia, with many thanks to his newly purchased orthopedic seat cover pillow, Joey nodded sagely as he looked around Erica Martin's office. It definitely met his expectation of what an important person's workspace should be. The wrestling executive had called a meeting to discuss the upcoming match between him and Jericho, but she had only invited him. Of course, Joey never did anything without Scally, so the little blonde menace was also present, much to the chagrin of Erica. Of course, she knew from Jump Street that the ill-equipped manager was just along for the ride, both literally and figuratively, but she also sensed his more destructive qualities, even though she hadn't quite witnessed them yet. "This is a sick office, Miss Martin," Joey exclaimed, unaware of the executive's misgivings. "Big too," Scally chimed in, blissfully oblivious to how unwelcome his presence was. He nodded toward the lush mahogany centerpiece between him and Erica. "Especially this desk. There's a lot of things one can do on a desk like this," he added sleazily, unwittingly pushing his luck. The underdog wrestler gave his manager a quick nudge. "Scal, she's not Asian." "Oh yeah." Scally gave the executive, who was way out of his league, a dismissive second glance. Never mind. Erica already regretted calling the meeting, but it was a necessary evil. "Thanks for stopping by," she said directly to Joey. Then she made a point to glare at Scally. "Both of you." The sarcasm was way too subtle for either of the Brooklynites to notice. "Any time," Joey beamed. "Are we here to discuss my future in pro wrestling?" "Maybe after the match," she answered noncommittally. Scally's antenna immediately went up. "So what's this about then? Lish signed his contract, passed his physical. You have another curveball to throw at him?" Erica shrugged. "Not necessarily, but you may see it as a twist on things." "Me?" "We worked out something with the Stallone camp," she began to explain with some delight. "He's going to be Joey's guest manager at the arena." Joey lit up like a Christmas tree, clearly not picking up on what that meant for his current manager. "No way. That's awesome." Scally didn't read the tea leaves either, but he felt a tremor of discomfort nonetheless. "Yeah, cool. So Stallone will be like my assistant during the match?" "No, he'll be you during the match," Erica explained, going right for the throat. "How could he be me?" "Because you'll be sitting in the upper level with a grand view of the entire proceedings. But then I'll walk Joey to the ring for the main event, while Stallone carries my stuff?" Still not fully getting it, Scally was beginning to grasp for straws. "No, again," Erica said stoically, smacking away those metaphorical straws. "Stallone's taken my seat in the upper level," the blonde genius asked yet again, but in another way. The executive had already used up her patience, but she still hadn't shown it. Yet. One way or the other, she would get the brain cell-strapped imp to swallow reality. "Stallone is in the ring with Joey." "Of course he is," Scally freely admitted. "For publicity photos before the match." "During the match," she shouted, finally losing her cool. "We're taking publicity photos during the match?" He had to be messing with her at this point, no? No. Erica was beyond exasperated. "Stallone is managing Joey during the match." "Guest managing," Joey chimed in, correcting her. "Same difference." She was still annoyed, but it was nice to hear at least one idiot on the other side of her desk following along. "So what's Scally doing?" "Nope. Also not following along." "I just told you. He'll be in the upper level. Or home. I don't care." "If you don't care, why can't he be in the ring with me?" Joey asked, turning illogical logic on her. "Because Stallone will be there," Erica shouted again. Was there a gun in the top drawer of her desk? For a split second, she thought she should check, because someone was about to get shot. But then it all seemed to finally click in the underground wrestler's mind. "Oh, Stallone will be there." He turned to his best friend. "Stallone will be there." "Understood," Scally freely admitted. Again. "The question is, where will I be?" He turned back to Erica with his negotiating mitts on. "So just to clarify, my options are the upper level home or the ring." Erica was finally rendered speechless. She was wholly convinced that the blonde dynamo of a manager was the dumbest creature ever to walk upright on her native planet. You know, Earth. The Irish runt misread her utter dismay as an opening to add one more idiocy log to the fire. "I choose ring if that's okay with everyone." The executive pointed to the door calmly. "Somehow. Get out of my sight." Thinking that he had finally won the day, Scally grinned from ear to ear. "Great. So we're all square?" Joey and Scally exited the pro wrestling building as if they had both sat through two completely different meetings. Joey was cautiously optimistic that his manager would take his sudden demotion in stride, while Scally was pumped as if no such demotion ever took place. Obviously, they were both in denial. It would be a long ride home from Philadelphia if the two could even make it to Mrs. Quesada's Honda Civic. For a second, Joey considered parting with the keys as a generous gesture. Scally wasn't drinking, so he could at least enjoy being behind the wheel for once. A fair consolation for losing his ringside credentials? No, but it was a start. Then he remembered that his little friend didn't even have a license. He failed his driving test 11 times and almost killed 3 driving instructors in the process. Scratch that. Yeah, baby, Scally cheered. All set for the big event. Should we pick up a pair of binoculars for you? Joey asked, pretending not to hear the excitement in his clueless friend's voice. What for? So you'll be able to see from the upper level. Scally thought that they had already been through this in the office and was in no mood to rehash matters. I thought we agreed I'd be in the ring. You agreed, Joey reminded him. They agreed Stallone would be there. And who do you agree with? Look, Scal, sometimes you gotta take one for the team. What team? I'm getting thrown off the team. The loyal, albeit incompetent manager already felt the sting of betrayal. He was Julius Caesar on the Ides of March. For one match, exclaimed his client, twisting the blade in a little further. The most important match of our career. My career. Now Scally pretended that he didn't hear that. Come again? If Joey could have taken back his words, he surely would have. But sometimes what's said is said. Wait, I didn't mean that. You know what? I'm walking home. And at that, the little man took his big emotional scars and stormed off. You can't walk home, the selfish Italian shouted after him. We're in Philadelphia. Scally ignored his best bud and kept walking. My mom's car, Joey pleaded. Who's going to navigate GPS? No dice. The blonde tornado disappeared in the distance as his one and only client dropped his head in remorse. It would take a grand gesture from the middle-aged, up-and-coming wrestler to make things right again. But right now, he couldn't think of one. With nothing else to say or do, he reached for the driver's side handle on the Civic. But before Joey could even get the door open, the real and very angry Hulk Hogan suddenly pulled up next to him in his bright red Cadillac convertible.
Where do you think you're going, brother?
Hogan stated as much as asked, glaring at the undeserving title contender. Hulk? For once, Joey actually wished that he was dreaming. He wasn't. The blonde behemoth jumped out of his car and towered over the average-sized brunette with highlights.
What's the matter? Don't you feel like smacking someone now?
You already got your revenge, Joey reminded him. You almost ended my career with that punch.
No one saw that punch.
You're beat shop fans.
But the only YouTube clip floating around social media is of you smacking me.
Hogan spat through clenched teeth. He pulled out his iPhone to prove his point.
Here, take a look for yourself.
But of course, Joey was more interested in the new Apple device than the screen. Nice. Is that the 15? The wrestling legend's demeanor suddenly did a 180.
Yeah, I just upgraded. You?
The Italian dream shook his head glumly. No, I'm still on the 8.
You should look into it. I have unlimited data now.
That's good, because there's probably no Wi-Fi out here. Hogan shoved Joey, shaking off the momentary distraction.
Enough with the iPhone talk. Just watch the video.
The Hulkster played the YouTube clip from his beat shop, and it clearly showed Joey tugging on his mustache and then smacking him in the face. The fans reacted appropriately, but they also crowded around the incredible scene so that it was impossible to see what happened next. Joey looked to his lifelong idol. Are you sure there's nothing of you hitting me? Hogan pointed to the screen as if it wasn't obvious enough.
The crowd surrounded us by then. There's only a clip of some fan's fat head in the way, and now I'm getting lambasted on Twitter.
The Italian Brooklynite let out a low whistle. That's too bad.
Too bad for you.
The star of 1989's No Holds Barred shot back with a growl.
Don't listen to him, Licious.
Someone else shouted from behind, startling Joey.
You're a title contender now.
It was as if Hogan was performing some otherworldly ventriloquist act. The voice was identical to his own. Joey turned and found that imaginary Hogan, you know, the one in his head, was standing on the other side of his mother's car. Of course, it was only a matter of time before a disaster like this would occur. That's okay, imaginary Hulk, he said matter-of-factly. I got this. Real Hogan frowned in confusion.
What did you just say?
It's kind of between me and him.
You and who?
Imaginary Hogan popped his knuckles.
Get in your mother's car and drive home. I'll deal with him.
The beleaguered Italian shook his head. Now that just sounds weird to me. The figment of his imagination stepped around the Civic and revealed that he was dressed exactly like the real McCoy. Joey looked between the two hulks, and it just got weirder. Real Hogan took a step back. He was actually a bit frightened at this point.
Who are you talking to? Are you nuts or something?
Well, I did smack you in the face, the Brawl graduate reminded him. The 12-time world champion nodded, appreciating how bananas that was.
Good point. But whether you're crazy or not, I'm still putting the kibosh on your title match.
Without another word, he headed straight for the pro wrestling building. Wait, Hulkster, don't do that, Joey called out in desperation, seeing his future slip away. Why would you do that?
I told you to let me deal with him,
Imaginary Hogan said. Somehow he was always right. How are you supposed to deal with him? You're not even here. Aren't you always telling me that? Imaginary Hogan just shrugged as his conjurer ran after the real one. Joey wasn't about to lose his title shot. Again. Chapter 20. The Revenge of the Hulkster. Sipping on a cup of coffee, Erica tried to clear her mind from the encounter with Joey and Scally. Especially Scally. The revolting thought of rolling around on her desk with that little runt made her weep for the female Asian community. Had she known what kind of headache the whole Rocky idea was going to cause, she would have strangled it in the crib, or at least been more selective in finding another wrestler. A process that, in retrospect, should have been based on more than just the guy looking like a Stallone knockoff, even if it was more Frank Stallone than Sylvester. All these thoughts immediately intensified when the door suddenly flew open and Hulk Hogan entered her office unannounced. Of course, Joey was following close behind like his shadow. The only thing that kept her from leaping to a quick death from her 19th-story window was that there was no sign of the scrawny blonde manager. Hogan turned and glared at Jericho's challenger. "Stay outside," he growled. "But shouldn't I be in on—" Joey's words and face were both stopped short by the door slamming shut on them. The blonde giant turned to Erica with a smile as if nothing was out of the ordinary.
Hey, Erica, how's Dad?
Understandably, her smile was more forced. "What can I do for you, Terry?"
Does he ever mention how close we still are? Or how I made professional wrestling the behemoth it is today?
Hogan asked with a rascally twinkle in his eye. The executive already felt a bit of déjà vu. There was something ominous about those two harmless questions. Could they lead to the same disjointed conversation that she just had with the two moronic Brooklynites? Suddenly, her window was looking like a tempting escape again. "I'm quite sure everyone is aware of that," she answered, putting her quick descending flight aside for the time being.
Well, in case Dad forgot, I have pictures.
The silent alarm in Erica's head finally triggered officially. This was definitely not a nostalgic visit of pleasantries. "What kind of pictures?"
Just pictures,
Hogan responded vaguely.
He'll know what they are. The 80s were a wild time for us, let me tell you.
She was only a kid at the time, but Erica heard the rumors. It was pro wrestling's heyday, but there were also illegal drugs, untimely deaths, sexual scandals, and the Hulkster's poorly synchronized air guitar performance in his cheesy "I Am a Real American" video. The KG executive kept her cool just the same. "What do I owe this visit?"
Jericho never fights the meatball for the title,
the wrestling legend stated, getting right to the point. But the supposed point only caused more confusion. Jericho isn't fighting Stallone.
Not that meatball,
Hogan shouted.
The meatball currently standing outside your office.
He pointed emphatically to Joey waving at them through the glass partition next to the door. Erica looked back at the Babe Ruth of wrestling and laughed. He wasn't amused.
That wasn't a joke.
"What is this about? The match is in a few days. We can't just up and change the marquee."
Sure you can, if you put me on it.
Erica scoffed. "You want to replace Joeylicious and fight Jericho yourself?" Hogan put his hands on her desk and leaned forward.
Would you like to run that by Dad? Or should I?
She sighed. "So, we're back to the pictures again."
And a few other things,
he added, reminding her of those rumors. God, why did they have to hand him a guitar in that video? With no obvious choice in the matter, Erica reluctantly picked up the phone and made the call. "Dad, Terry just stopped by. He wants to fight at our upcoming event." She looked up at the intimidating figure for a moment, then turned her attention back to the phone. "The title match," she clarified. There was another pause as she listened to her father's response. "Yes, against Jericho," she said, her tone colored with annoyance. Hogan walked around to her side of the desk, distracting the executive once again. Erica looked up but kept her focus on the call. He's not telling me why, but he says he has pictures. She sighed again, fully relenting her authority in the matter. Okay, hold on. She held out the phone to her most unwelcome guest. He wants to speak to you. Hogan knew it was only a matter of time, so he took the phone smugly.
Hey, brother, do you remember our boat trip in '85?
It was his turn to listen to the mysterious force of nature on the other end of the line.
No, not that. The one with the dwarves.
He smiled as the reply was clearly the one he was waiting for.
Thank you.
He handed the phone back to Erica. The executive kept her suspicious eye on the hulking Hulk. Dad? It only took a couple of seconds for her to nod in agreement with her father. Okay, I'll make it happen. She hung up and pursed her lips. She was defeated on this day, but all was fair in love, war, and wrestling. I guess we'll see you on Saturday, she said to the former champion and new challenger. Hogan didn't celebrate just yet.
Are there any legal issues to iron out?
Joeylicious has a contract with us, but we'll find a loophole. The answer was satisfactory.
Good,
he simply said. Then he turned and headed out of the office, leaving a new mess for Erica to deal with. Joey, a novice lip reader at best, had been leaning face first against the glass partition when Hogan exited. What just happened? He asked desperately, leaving a clouded breath stain on the glass. Are we cool? The blonde giant didn't even acknowledge him as he continued on his way. Hulkster, come back! We can still squash this. When it became clear that his hero wasn't going to stop or answer, Joey popped his head back into Erica's office. Am I in trouble? I'd say so, the executive answered, showing no emotion. What can I do? He pleaded, feeling a bit sorry for the man-child who had done so much to reach this point in his pitiful wrestling career, including recovering from a blown-apart ring and ass. Erica decided to throw him one last bone. I'll give you the rest of the day to talk Hogan out of it. Panic engulfed Joey. He was now even more unclear about what just took place. But he knew it couldn't have been good. It never was. Out of what? Joey ran full tilt out of the pro wrestling building, praying that he would be able to catch Hogan before he left. Jake, the snake, and a grenade almost tore up his golden ticket before. He wasn't about to let anyone else go around pulling pins. Especially now that he was in the clear. Or should have been. How ironic was it that his greatest hero was about to put the kibosh on his last chance to become one as well? Somewhere out there, maybe even outside of Brooklyn, a little boy was destined to play with a Joeylicious action figure. So he would find the Hulkster and reason with him for the sake of that little boy. As he reached the parking lot, he saw the red Cadillac convertible drive off. He dashed to his mom's Civic and followed in hot pursuit. It took a while, but Joey caught up to Hogan along the Philadelphia Parkway. The Civic pulled up parallel to the convertible in the next lane over. The brunette with the L'Oreal highlights did everything he could to grab the intimidating blonde's attention. But it was the furious honking of his mother's horn and waving like a madman that finally did the trick. But instead of pulling over, Hogan laughed, hit the gas, and left Joey in the dust. Not dissuaded by the unfortunate turn of events, Joey stepped on the gas and felt the Civic begin to rattle. It was like he was riding in a rocket ship that couldn't crack. Both cars raced past Scally, walking along the road with his thumb out and head down. He quickly looked up and couldn't believe what he saw. But before the visual of the bizarre car chase could even sink in, a white Jeep suddenly pulled up next to him. The driver rolled down his passenger side window. Need a lift, my friend? Scally was immediately suspicious. There was something about this wannabe Good Samaritan that didn't sit right. What's your angle? No angle. Where you headed? The scrawny but scrappy Brooklynite narrowed his eyes and pointed to the passenger seat. What's in the box? The driver pulled out a book on Scientology and held it up. I sell these, he explained. Are you familiar with L. Ron Hubbard? No, but I'm familiar with L. Dong Hubby. Who's that? Scally smiled in his all-too-familiar sleazy manner. A male porn star from New Jersey. Never heard of Forrest Hump or Monty's Python? Quality cinema? The driver was clearly offended. Have a nice walk. He pulled back onto the parkway, leaving the ungrateful hitchhiker in a cloud of engine exhaust. Candy ass! Scally coughed as he shouted after the Philadelphian. Chapter 21. One former millionaire, two Hogans, and a Virgil. With the usual supply of scantily dressed waitresses working the floor during lunchtime, Hulk Hogan sat at a booth in Hooters eating a mound of hot wings, a few sticks of celery, and a side of fries. This was a special place for the Hulkster. The first Hooters location was built in Clearwater, Florida, and he was there for the grand opening in October of '83. He had actually helped shut down the restaurant early on that festive night. He and Andre the Giant devoured 500 wings together, and would have eaten more if the place hadn't run out. They couldn't even open the next day because of the unexpected shortage. 2 months later, Hogan returned to the WWF as a conquering hero, and a month after that, he was the world champ. As for the Giant, who took down 350 of the 500 wings himself that October night, he was banned nationwide from ever ordering the spicy delights in Hooters again. For the rest of his life, TGI Fridays would have to deal with his chicken cravings. Joey entered the family restaurant with his eyes darting about. No time for semi-erotic visuals, he spotted Hogan soon enough. But as he headed in, he also saw another WWF legend approach the blonde behemoth. Of all people, it was the $1 Million Man Ted DiBiase, an old nemesis of the Hulkster. The longtime wrestling fan froze in bewilderment. Hogan looked up from his messy meal and was equally surprised.
Ted, you're still the manager here? I thought you were buying your own franchise.
DiBiase shrugged. Long gone was his gold-studded $sign-covered suit, replaced with a bland dress shirt and an owl-covered tie.
Hasn't worked out for me yet, Hulk,
he confessed.
Want some fries?
Hogan offered.
The doc says I should lay off them anyway.
He pushed them toward the struggling millionaire.
Don't mind if I do.
DiBiase slid into the booth and grabbed a handful of grease sticks.
So, what brings you to the East Coast?
Just taking care of a little business.
Will you be in New York on Saturday for the main event?
Hogan smiled.
More than you know, brother.
Joey, having regained his composure, marched in and interrupted the unholy reunion. What the heck is this?
Give it a rest, will you?
The blonde giant's stomach had just started being appeased. Otherwise, he would have stood up and swatted the Italian gnat. How can you sit here and break bread with the $1 Million Man, the gnat pressed. He helped the Giant cheat you out of your championship belt, and then bought it for himself. This was a sordid affair that included an evil twin referee in the winter of '88. And it obviously stuck in Joey's craw. DiBiase's forehead wrinkled in vague recognition.
Hey, aren't you that Joeylicious guy who's fighting Jericho?
Joeylicious, the offended upstart shouted.
And he won't be fighting Jericho,
Hogan declared, devouring a wing in one bite for emphasis. The Hooters manager frowned.
Oh, but I thought...
Suddenly, Virgil, the former bodyguard of the $1 Million Man, charged in wearing a gold-studded $sign-covered suit of his own.
DiBiase,
he yelled.
Since when are the employees here allowed lunch breaks?
DiBiase quickly stood to attention as if he was being reprimanded by a drill sergeant at basic training.
I'm sorry, Mr. Virgil.
His former bodyguard smiled mockingly and waved.
No, sit down. Finish your fries. I'm only running a business here.
Hogan was baffled by what was happening before his eyes.
Wait, does that mean?
Virgil's smile widened.
That's right. I'm the owner, and Moneybags works for me now.
Joey couldn't keep up with the mind-numbing events he was witnessing either. I must be in an alternate universe, he mumbled to himself. As if the underground wrestler needed any further complications, imaginary Hogan suddenly re-emerged.
Need any help, Lish? Looks like you're outnumbered.
Joey rubbed his face in frustration. I told you before, I'm handling this. Virgil looked at the delusional patron incredulously.
Handling what? Didn't you just hear me say, this is my joint?
Real Hogan shook his head.
Don't mind him, Virgil. He's got a screw loose.
But the rightful boss man glared at Joey, not about to just let that slide.
Oh, so what? A black man can't own a Hooters franchise? Is that it?
Sticking up for his Italian conjurer, fearless imaginary Hogan clenched his fists.
I can take on both of these guys, and myself included if I have to.
But you don't have to, Joey reminded him. That's the point. Virgil, fed up, was definitely having a different conversation with Joey than Joey was having with himself.
Get your ass out of here.
He started shoving the intruding Brooklynite toward the door, banging into Real Hogan's table and sloshing some of his drink in the process.
Hey, I'm trying to eat here.
Real Hogan warned.
Yeah, we're trying to eat.
Imaginary Hogan agreed. Virgil wasn't having any of it.
It's on the house, Hulkster. Now you and your friend can both leave.
Imaginary Hogan looked at Joey with confusion.
Does that mean I have to leave too?
Joey rolled his eyes. Stop talking like that. Nobody can see or hear you. How many times have we been over this? Everyone paused at that bizarre statement before looking to each other for confirmation. Did they all hear the same thing?
This guy is nuts.
DiBiase finally said, breaking the silence. With that, he and his former bodyguard current boss escorted Joey and Real Hogan to the door. Imaginary Hogan casually followed his master and his actual self out as the two beach shop adversaries were tossed into the street like a couple of hobos.
How do you get us thrown out of Hooters?
The blonde behemoth spat at the disrespectful wrestling challenger.
Where am I supposed to eat now?
I'm not that familiar with Philly, but I'm sure there's another place, Joey offered without offering. Did you try a search on your iPhone 11? Real Hogan gave the L'Oreal-tinged Italian a look, more than hinting that a strangulation was on the table. As Scally trudged along the Philadelphia Parkway, he couldn't help but dwell on his lifelong friendship with his one and only client. How could Joey just shove him aside for the likes of Sly Stallone? Granted, Cobra and Rhinestone were all-time classics, but the scrawny Irishman and medium-sized Italian were more than just best friends. They grew up together, went to school together, broke bread together, got arrested together, slept together, had pseudo-intellectual discussions about nature and the ice-capades together, and now they were about to fight for the Pro Wrestling World Championship together, and some 74-year-old super buff action film star was going to get in the way? Not a chance. Okay, a small chance, but he would do everything in his power to sabotage that arrangement. Only how? Racking his fiendish little mind, the sky suddenly opened up and rain began pouring down on him. Scally looked to the heavens in protest. Come on, man! With the cold wetness now fueling his anger, the blonde blight to humanity broke into a jog, sticking his thumb back out in the hopes that someone would take pity on him. Finally, a car filled with college kids slowed down as it approached. For a fleeting second, there was hope as one of the students rolled down the back window. Unfortunately, it was a frat boy. Hey, loser, the frat boy shouted, have some vitamin C. Scally saw something orange and round speed toward his head, but was too tired to do anything about it. Instead, he just stood there as the tropical fruit hit him square in the face, bowling him over. The young assholes in the car broke into hysterics before peeling away. It was also raining back at the Hooters parking lot where Hulk Hogan was in the middle of closing the roof of his convertible. He started to question his decision to drive to Philadelphia in the first place. It wasn't his method of transportation that bothered him. He was having second thoughts on whether he should have made the trip at all. Sure, the irksome Italian needed to be taught a lesson. But was it worth the splitting headache he had now? Joey reminded him of a crazed fan he had filed a restraining order against in '87. That guy found out where he lived and continuously showed up on his doorstep in random costumes. The nut was dressed as the lovable alien from the sitcom Alf when the cops finally slapped the cuffs on. Sad, actually. He used to love that show. With the roof all the way up, the Hulkster was finally set for his dry escape. Unfortunately, Joey jumped into the passenger seat before he could pull away.
How does one get away from you without actually killing you?
Hogan bemoaned.
You're still breathing, so there must be a way.
Hulkster, you have to give me a chance, Joey pleaded. Again.
A chance at what? They already let you out of your straitjacket. You should quit while you're ahead.
I can explain that too. Hogan shook his head, pleading in his own way for the mentally unstable wrestler not to continue.
Please don't.
Something or someone in the rearview mirror caught Joey's attention. It was imaginary Hogan smiling back at him.
Lish, we don't need this guy. Let's just go back to Brawl and dominate like you did in your 20s.
The Italian daydream wheeled around in a huff. I'll deal with you in a minute. Real Hogan was now accustomed to this sort of strange behavior, so instead of fearing for his own safety, he just rolled his eyes.
There he goes again. He's explaining it.
Joey refocused on the task at hand. Do you know what this title shot means to me? He asked the blonde giant behind the wheel. You've already had your reign. Why can't you just pass the torch?
I have no problem passing the torch, brother. I'm just not passing it to a can of gasoline.
Hulkster, you're my lifelong hero. I wouldn't be here right now if it wasn't for you.
That makes sense.
Real Hogan pointed out.
This is my car.
I mean, ever since you beat the Sheik, the wrestling legend shot Joey a bored look.
Everyone brings up that match, dummy.
Imaginary Hogan reminded his conjurer. Joey shook off his amateur mistake and scrambled for a different angle. Or when you lost your title to the Ultimate Warrior, the way you came back from that. I've had to come back from quite a few losses myself, more than he would ever admit to. Real Hogan didn't need details.
I can imagine,
he said sarcastically.
Let the man finish.
Imaginary Hogan shouted.
Lish is opening up to you right now.
Joey again turned on the figment of his imagination. Would you get out of the car already? Since when do you guys speak directly to other people I'm with?
Maybe we're tired of you doing all the talking.
Imaginary Hogan shot back, speaking on behalf of the other legendary delusions who couldn't fit in the car.
Look where that's gotten you so far.
Enough, the underground wrestler growled. Real Hogan looked to Joey, then to the empty back seat, then back to Joey.
I really need to get going. But just for my own personal amusement, who or what are you talking to back there?
I'm talking to you, Joey said matter-of-factly, as if the intimidating figure behind the wheel wasn't confused enough.
Me?
I can explain everything. Just drive. That got an uncomfortable laugh.
Yeah, I'd love to continue this on the road, but there is the issue of the Honda Civic.
Real Hogan reminded him, thinking he could finally make a clean getaway. Joey waved that insignificant detail away. I left my mother's car at your beach shop in Tampa. I can leave it at a Hooters in Philadelphia.
I was afraid you'd say something like that.
The real McCoy muttered. Caving to the unavoidable, he then drove out of the parking lot with Joey and his own imaginary self. The imaginary self that he would never meet. Or so he hoped. Chapter 22. You can't walk home from Philadelphia. Scally, now drenched from the rain, pulled himself off the pavement and continued to lumber down the hazardous 3-lane road. He didn't even bother to stick out his thumb anymore in an effort to flag down a passing vehicle. It looked as if he would pass out at any moment, but a mirage of Washi and Seo up ahead kept him going. He hadn't seen or spoke to the two Asian beauties since Samurai Dwayne aborted their last mission of pleasure. But here they were now, seductively waving for him to come to them right in the middle of the parkway. A cacophony of honking horns blared from the traffic that swerved around the pathetic blonde creature, but all the sights and sounds that surrounded him fell away into nothingness, all except Washi and Seo. If he could just make it to their loving arms, a violent death wouldn't be so bad. In fact, he would welcome it. Finally, a tan Chevy pulled up alongside Scally, and his delusional tunnel vision shattered. He turned to the senior citizen female driver with desperation in his eyes. If you aren't a sad sack of human excrement, I don't know what is, the old battle axe stated with a toothy grin. Scally tilted his head to the side. Grandma? She scoffed. Luckily, I'm not that blessed. Where are you crawling to? Brooklyn. It was a Hail Mary at best, but why not ask for the miracle and settle on New Jersey? That's like a 2-day walk from here, the senior driver exclaimed. Do you have a death wish? Turn back, son. It ain't worth it. Please, I'll do anything, Scally pleaded pathetically. But as his vision came into full focus on the leather-skinned 80-year-old, he wished that he could reframe his words. Too late. She flashed him a sleazy gaze that reminded him of his own. Maybe she was related to him after all. Anything? She clearly had some revolting ideas on her mind. He involuntarily licked his lips, but then quickly swallowed his tongue, realizing what that may have implied. Well, you wouldn't be part Asian, would you? The dirty old lady waved him into her car, not caring one way or the other what that even meant. Get in. I'll drop you where I drop you. Scally cautiously smiled and limped his way into the passenger seat. He barely got the door closed before she took off down the parkway. The strange trio of real Hogan, imaginary Hogan, and Joey were en route to nowhere in particular when the lifelong underground wrestler, with the special condition, finished explaining his situation. And that's why I smacked you at your beat shop. Real Hogan couldn't help but laugh.
You gotta love the mouth of the South. Even the imaginary one causes problems.
Joey nodded. Tell me about it.
And we've been appearing to you since you were a kid?
Lately, the visits have been more frequent.
So, what am I like?
Real Hogan honestly wondered. Joey glanced back at imaginary Hogan, who, of course, was already smiling back. "You're a pain in the ass." The giant figment of the Italian dream's imagination quickly smacked him in the back of the head for that verbal transgression. "Hey, watch it back there," Joey protested, rubbing away the pain.
I just saw that.
Real Hogan exclaimed, catching the nut in his passenger seat red-handed, literally.
You smacked yourself. Do you even realize you're doing that?
Joey continued to rub his head. Not a clue.
Either you are crazy, or this is one hell of an act.
So you'll let me fight Jericho?
Now, I never said that.
Real Hogan reminded him. It wasn't going to be that easy. "Come on, Hulkster," Joey cried out in frustration. "What if I wrestled you for it?" Imaginary Hogan immediately perked up.
Great idea.
The reaction from the front, though, was less kind as Real Hogan laughed mockingly.
Wrestle me? Where?
The Brooklynite looked around excitedly and noticed that the windshield wipers were no longer on. It stopped raining. Quickly spotting something else, he pointed out the window. "How about that park over there?" The 12-time world champion shook his head.
You are crazy. Lish, I think he's chicken.
Imaginary Hogan said, giving Joey fuel to bait his hero. You know, the live one. Joey took the soundless comment like a baton and passed it on to the driver. "What's the matter, Hulk? You chicken?" The bait worked a little too well, and the blonde behemoth slammed on the brakes. He looked as if he might pull the teasing Italian's head off.
Okay, brother, let's do it. You and me. Winner gets the title shot.
Joey raised his fists triumphantly, even though he was about to get his ass handed to him. Probably. "This is the greatest day of my life." Scally wasn't having nearly as much fun as his one and only client, but at least he was heading home now at a faster clip, a clip that didn't require the use of his legs, which he could no longer feel. He hadn't gotten this much exercise since Samurai Dwayne chased him out of his parents' house. Fleeing for his life, he was just about to meet his maker when the 5-0 finally stepped in on his behalf for once. As suspicious as it was to spot a white guy running through the streets in his underwear, spotting a black guy in hot pursuit with a deadly sword won the day. Miraculously, the cops only fired a warning shot at the samurai, and the rapid-firing sex machine made a clean getaway. Well, not so clean, actually. There was the issue of his underwear, which, understandably, wasn't so white anymore. Still out of it, Scally grabbed something from the back seat of the Chevy and began drying his face. The senior driver gave the blonde damsel in distress a sideways glance as if she knew something that he didn't. And she did, unfortunately. "That's my underwear, Sonny, but I did mention the towel in the back was mixed with my other laundry." Scally, obviously disgusted, immediately stopped drying off and looked at the old lady panties in horror. "Are you on your way to the laundromat or on your way back?" he asked, praying for the best but expecting the worst. "I'm afraid, as far as you're concerned, yeah, those are dirty," she confessed. "Ugh," he cried, flinging them back to where they came from. "Now let's get back to this so-called betrayal." They had obviously been discussing something relevant before the underwear mishap, and the tough old broad wanted to steer them back on topic. Scally folded his arms in defiance. "Let's not. Don't you think you're acting a little selfish?" "How am I selfish?" "It sounds like your friend didn't have a choice," she explained. "He could have fought for me," he shouted, still reeling from the fresh wound. The senior driver was clearly not going to let the so-called wrestling manager get away with that. "He's been fighting for you his whole life. You just said you've been in this together since you were kids. Have you stepped into a ring even once to take a beating like he does?" "No, my beatings usually occur in the bleachers," Scally admitted. "Okay, so show some support. When your friend is in a position to call the shots, I'm sure he'll take you along for the ride." The emotionally damaged runt stopped to think about that. It wasn't what he wanted to hear, but he was getting a lift. Arguing with the sassy old-timer seemed counterproductive. "I guess," he simply offered, not willing to commit. Unfortunately, she read his half-ass response as just that half-ass. "And speaking of rides, this is where yours ends," she said, fed up with her unappreciative riding companion. "I gotta turn off this next exit here." Of course, this was an unwelcome surprise to Scally. "Wait, hold on," he protested, but she didn't. And the car immediately pulled over on the shoulder of the parkway. Yes, they were still in Philly. "You can't just leave me," the rundown hitchhiker pleaded. "Forget the thumb bit, lover, and shake that little ass of yours," the perverted senior suggested. "I'm sure someone will come along." He opened his mouth to further state his case, but was unceremoniously shoved out of the car before his closing argument. All right, I'm going, he muttered, knowing he was beat. Here's a souvenir for you, she said with a raspy cackle. Scally's view was suddenly obscured by something. He could hear the Chevy leaving as he pulled the object off his face. It was the dirty underwear, again. But the blonde menace wasn't disgusted this time. Instead, he glanced around before discreetly tucking the panties in his pocket. That woman may have been his soulmate. If only she was several decades younger and way more East Coast. Chapter 23. Dream Match. In a deserted grass area of a quiet park, Joeylicious sized up his hero, the one, the only, Hulk Hogan. He could hardly believe his luck. And he meant that in a good way for once. For decades, he could only dream of this moment. He dreamt of it so much, in fact, that an imaginary being had formed, one that walked, talked, and delivered pain just like the real one. All that he had ever learned, both in and outside the ring, would have to be on full display if he had even the slightest chance of victory. The Hulkster had defeated the Iron Sheik, King Kong Bundy, Andre the Giant, Rowdy Roddy Piper, the Macho Man Randy Savage, Sergeant Slaughter, and The Undertaker, to name but a few. And that was just in the 80s and early 90s. In stark contrast, Joeylicious, also known as the Tower of Power who was too sweet to be sour, defeated Tiny, Una Grenada, Milkshake, and a few other underground wrestling nobodies over his not-so-illustrious career. Yet here he was. Finally, the Hulkster prepared himself.
Your move, Lish.
The Italian Dream looked around. Shouldn't someone ring the bell? Imaginary Hogan reappeared and stepped too close to the real one.
Ding, ding,
he announced sarcastically, making a bell-ringing motion with his hand. The annoyed brawl graduate shooed the imposter away. Get out of there! How am I supposed to tell you two apart? The ghost-like figure, who wasn't a ghost at all, realized the problem.
Okay, I'll back it up,
he said while stepping away.
It's a good thing you won't be pulling any of that wackiness at Saturday's match,
Real Hogan said matter-of-factly to his non-sanctioned opponent. Joeylicious grinned as he adjusted his wrestling stance, searching for an opening. How do you know what I'll be doing then?
Because you won't be at Saturday's match.
The blonde behemoth suddenly charged in and delivered a brutal clothesline, knocking the rank amateur to the wet grass. Touché, Joeylicious groaned as he laid flat in pain.
Are you getting up?
Real Hogan asked mockingly. You know, I just realized something, the Italian Dream reflected.
What?
You hurt much more in real life. This was an affront to imaginary Hogan just as much as it was to the real one. And both Hulksters shouted their identical displeasures at exactly the same time.
Get your ass up.
Joeylicious could only marvel at the eerie coincidence. Wow, in stereo. Real Hogan grabbed him and administered a headlock. Fortunately for the underdog, the dampness that he accumulated from his fall allowed him to quickly slither out of the vice grip.
Slippery son of a gun,
the experienced champion admitted with some frustration. I'm full of surprises, Joeylicious stated proudly. Hero and Prodigy went at it again, and this time they locked up. It was an epic display of strength by both men, and other people in the park finally took notice.
Not bad, Lish.
Real Hogan complimented the underling sincerely.
I see you've been hitting the gym, but I would have ripped these puny arms off in my heyday.
Keep dreaming, Hulkster, the underling grunted. Although, I do agree with you.
Here comes the crowd.
Imaginary Hogan chimed in excitedly from the sidelines. Soon the fighters were surrounded by a buzzing audience, and many began to film the battle with their smartphones. Real Hogan glanced around and was pleased with the publicity.
Good. We're being filmed. They'll get a clear shot of me kicking your ass this time.
The blonde giant easily lifted his opponent for a potential body slam, but a severe pain suddenly shot through his spine, forcing him to drop the much smaller man limply to the grass.
My back,
he cried as he hunched over in excruciating pain. Joeylicious got back to his feet and was sincerely concerned for his lifelong idol. Is it from your old Andre the Giant injury? I'm like 1/3 his weight.
I'm 70 years old and didn't get a chance to stretch properly.
Real Hogan shot back. So you're submitting?
Never.
I can't fight you in that condition, the sensitive Brooklynite insisted.
Do you want that title shot?
the 12-time champion growled.
Bring it on. You heard him, Lish.
Imaginary Hogan called out, cheering his delusional master on. All right, if you say so, Joeylicious warned. And at that, he leapt up and dropped a vicious and delicious elbow on the back of real Hogan's head. The legendary wrestler collapsed to the grass, and the Italian Dream jumped on him for the pin. Imaginary Hogan, suddenly playing referee, got to the count of 2 before real Hogan kicked out, exciting the surrounding audience. Joeylicious got to his feet first, though, and didn't spare his hero even a moment to gather himself. Instead, he stomped on real Hogan's stomach and put him in a devastating figure-4 leg lock. But even at 70, the Hulkster was no mere mortal. Just when the crowd was ready to give up on him, the legend reversed the leg submission hold and inflicted incredible pain on his opponent instead.
Submit Licious,
he shouted, knowing it was all but over.
I'm gonna break your leg.
The Italian Dream, who still had a dream, clenched his teeth. Then break it. There's no way I'm quitting. He held on for dear life, desperately trying to stave off the agony. Real Hogan, now deeply concerned for his worthy combatant's health, looked around for assistance.
Someone throw in a towel. Quick!
No! Joeylicious cried. Somehow Imaginary Hogan produced a towel and threw it into the middle of the fight. Of course, it vanished as soon as it left his hand. No one has a towel, an onlooker hollered. The blonde giant grimaced.
A shirt, then. Anything.
Hulkster, don't let them do it, the tenacious underground wrestler pleaded. But a curvy and quite attractive woman in the crowd finally showed mercy by ripping off her shirt and tossing it toward the fighters, officially ending the non-sanctioned match. Real Hogan immediately released the pressure on Joeylicious's leg, and the defeated Italian grabbed his throbbing but still intact limb. The well-entertained onlookers cheered more for the newly exposed breasts of the generous woman than for the victor. No fair, the Italian Dream shouted, his dream now shattered. I never gave up!
That's right, you didn't.
The Pro Wrestling Hall of Famer surprisingly admitted.
But you're gonna need that leg for Jericho.
Joeylicious froze and locked eyes with his hero. Did he just hear that right? His hero smiled down at him.
You proved yourself today, brother. You're ready for your shot.
The amazing news still took a moment to fully register. Hulkster, you're the greatest, Joeylicious finally said.
Hey, what about me?
Imaginary Hogan protested. The delusional Brooklynite gave the figment of his imagination a well-deserved nod. Ditto. The crowd roared in appreciation for the happy storybook ending. They thought the outcome of the less arousing match was pretty cool, too. Back in Brooklyn, at the end of a familiar sex addiction meeting, the counselor and his struggling patrons began to file out. Of course, this was the same group Scally had been associated with before he was unceremoniously, but quite predictably, exiled. It hadn't been a total loss for the scrawny tornado, though. Before his abrupt departure, he met 2 Asian goddesses and devoured many tasty donuts from the refreshment table. And now, utterly exhausted, he stumbled back in. Unable to hitch another ride during his perilous journey, Scally did manage to sneak onto the top of a truck at a gas station in New Jersey, but he was almost decapitated at the entrance to the Lincoln Tunnel as he held on for dear life re-entering New York. Of course, the truck didn't coincidentally bring him all the way to where he was now. It was the final stretch he was forced to walk that really kicked his ass. Washi, Sayo, water, he pleaded before collapsing. Most of the addicts could care less as they stepped over the pathetic blonde obstacle blocking the exit, but the 2 Asian beauties came to his side. Oh my God, Sayo exclaimed sweetly. Poor Scally. Get him something to drink, Washi simply said, displaying far less emotion. And a donut, Scally added. Sayo hurried to the refreshment table and quickly returned with a glass of water and a chocolate donut. Washi roughly propped up the little man's head so he could drink and eat. What happened? She asked, not really caring one way or the other. Philadelphia walked, Scally muttered before guzzling down the water and devouring the donut in one bite. Easy, Washi shouted, scolding him for his impatience. Apparently, his rapid-firing sex machine qualities extended to other aspects of his being. You walked from Philadelphia to see us? Sayo cooed. That's so romantic. Samurai, Scally brought up cautiously, his mouth dealing with donut remains. Of course, he still had nightmares of their jealous ex-boyfriend, the African-American swordsman who so rudely interrupted their last attempted love-making session. He went to Japan for 6 months, Washi said, dismissing the wannabe Casanova's concern. Advanced training, Scally turned his full attention to her. So when he returns, he'll be even more formidable? She waved that off as well. Don't worry about that. Sayo lovingly ran her fingers through the imp's greasy blonde hair. She's right, Scally. We'll take care of you now. He closed his eyes and smiled, enjoying the gentle caress. Unfortunately, this was only the calm before the next storm. Washi spotted the old lady panties sticking out of the pervert's pocket and yanked them out. Are those yours? A bewildered Sayo asked her female playmate, now alerted to them as well. Do they look like mine? Washi answered angrily. They both glared at their Scally with utter contempt. Without waiting for an explanation, they harshly dropped his head to the hard floor and stood up. Ow! What's happening? The unlucky menace protested. The two beauties just stepped over him, turning out the lights on their way out the door. It was just some old lady, Scally cried out in the dark. I would never be unfaithful. It was the end of a long, tumultuous, but ultimately rewarding day, when Joey and Hulk Hogan strolled back into the Hooters parking lot. There may have been a title match on the horizon, but it could never top the epic struggle Joey just survived. How could it? He just went toe-to-toe with his lifelong hero and managed to hold his own. Sure, the Hulkster was in his early 70s. And sure, he had thrown out his back. And sure, he still technically beat Joey. But it was the highlight of the underground wrestler's life, and would remain so till his dying day. Or so he thought. Little did Joey know what was in store for him on Saturday night. That was some match, Hulkster, the Italian Cinderella story stated, living the dream. Hogan nodded proudly.
Yeah, brother, we really put on a show.
How's your back?
Better. Somehow when you had me down in that figure 4, it snapped back into place.
That's the last time I'll try that move on you, Joey promised, more to himself than to his hero. A homeless man lying on a bench eyeballed the pair strangely as they passed by. From his point of view, some olive-skinned weirdo with L'Oreal highlights and a Brooklyn accent was just chatting with himself as he headed toward a 2007 Honda Civic. The Hulkster, real or imagined, was nowhere to be seen.